Good morning. We are midway through November. I can't even believe I'm saying that. We're like really rounding the corner to Thanksgiving. We're at a place where we're making travel plans, figure out what we're going to eat. We have to know because it's a day about eating, so we have to know what we're going to eat on that day, which is more planning than we usually do, at least in this house. So it's the shift is definitely happening. And one of the places we feel shifts in our body, this is interesting talking about bodies is the channel for the experience we're having. It's one of the reasons why it's really helpful to acknowledge these certain rhythms we're all moving through. They do affect us physically. It's gotten colder. We've gone through the time change. So our internal clocks are really shifting, and our internal metabolic temperature gauge, how much heat we have to generate to stay warm, and whether we're doing it outside or not because of the weather changes. And then the light just dropped down, like it feels like 30 degrees, right? Like, whoa, way more dark than it has been. And it's thrown our internal clocks off. So we've got all that going on. Let's just start with that as the base. And that happens every year around this time. So we're kind of aware of it, but we are shocked a little bit, I think, each time by the magnitude of the shift. And we feel it in our bodies like plate tectonics. And so sometimes these things stay mental or emotional for us, and we don't necessarily realize that the things we're feeling physically often have a lot to do with these external pressures, not just what we're doing physically, but also the physical environment we're moving through and its physical changes, which is what we just talked about. And then those exert physical changes on us. That is essentially the whole philosophy of Ayurveda, which I'm not going to get into here. But that it just to say that they really look at seasonal shifts and how you change the temperatures of your body with food and various self-care routines and yoga. It's fascinating. And so seasonal shifts always make me think of it. Today, we're going to have a little bit more therapeutic bent, and we're going to kind of think about the hips as a landing pad for weight transfer, right? As we're walking. So if you come onto your back and just do a little side to side rock, and I'm kind of got my hands up and bent at the elbows here, and I'm letting one hand be heavy and then the other, and letting the head move in that register, right? So this is a little self-massage technique. It's sort of like rinsing, which we do in the twist, which we can do a little bit later, but this is more slushing, right? You can kind of feel the weight shift side to side. And we're gonna add the knees in this pendulum action so that the spine, the upper and lower bodies moving together. And then try to figure out where the middle is between the two and see if you can feel them, where the twist of the rope is to move them together. Maybe harder to feel when we're on same-sided movement, and maybe easier to feel when we start to go cross lateral, which is opposite arm and leg, or opposite lower body direction and upper body direction. Right? So we're going to talk through this in a couple of functional movement explorations here. Side to side, letting each side get a little heavier than the other, like a teeter-totter. Sink the hip each time, drop, right? And we're not going very far side to side. We're just getting weighted in the hips and shoulder on that side, letting the limbs fall down a little bit, and then exhaling, weighted on the other side. So now we're going to slow it down a little bit, weighted. See if you can drop that arm all the way down and relax the head and leg to the side without pushing them. Feel the opposite side lengthen in response. Inhale, center, exhale, other side, weighted. Heavy head, heavy shoulders, heavy hips. Inhale, center, exhale, weighted over to the other side. So you're trying to let the underside of the body, those points that are in contact with the floor, side of the head, shoulders, ribs, back of the hip, and then into the side of the hip, drop and melt down into the floor. And I have an image here. Inhale, center, exhale, the other side. Just take your time. an image here of being made of sand. And if you move a sandbag or you tip an hourglass, the grains of sand sort of fall and spin and drop down into the ground. It's sort of a whooshing feeling, like a beanbag. So kind of feel the fluid shift as you go side to side as well. And the exhale will help you melt it down. Another analogy, you see what works best for you. Inhale, center, and then exhale is the idea of butter going from frozen or cold room temperature to melting in a gently warm pan. It's not sizzling, it's just spreading out and becoming liquid, right? And we have that ability. Fascia is very much, I don't know if it's high in fat content, but it melts when you apply heat to it. We can see that when we cook meat, we eat meat. We can see the fascia kind of melts when you apply heat. And this pressure, this downward rush of warm body fluids and the release into the floor is applying an internal heat. And then the intentional breath, it's all really a very metabolic process in that your body is processing held tension. Come back to the center here. Hopefully you felt some melting of the tissues there. And we'll drop the knees together to touch. And I'll talk about the props we need for class today and also kind of the intent. While you're laying back here, go ahead and grab your towel roll. We'll have that today for sure. And put it on the back of the head. And the very first thing to do here is align your spine with center, find midline. It's really, really important. It might be the most important thing you do today for your physical well-being. Find midline. This is a place we can move from in a balanced way. So we have to know where it is, and we have to have it lined up top to bottom, which is really saying a lot because any imbalance on one side of our body will cause rotation and compensation on the other side. So we have to anticipate that. And then in order to bring our bodies into better balance, we need to be kind of taking time regularly to dial it into center and to know where this midline is. So we're also going to bring the arms up overhead. The towel's settled at the back of my head. It's a little high, but not too high. So I'm just going to unroll it a skosh, right? And that's the beauty of this towel roll. It's really infinitely adjustable within its maximum height, right? To fully flat, but within that range, you really have a lot of play in terms of where you land here. And it's just on the back of the head. Take the arms out to the side into a T and see if you can feel weighted in the back of the arms here. And then without a sense of squeezing or pressure, just soften the ribs into center so they're not holding up and away. And then see if you can soften the backs of the shoulders and maybe get a little extra length in the tailbone by just letting the low belly, the belly right above the pubic bone and the pelvic floor, maybe too, just fall inward and down to the base of the spine. So that's not a heavy contraction, but you might get a little engagement of the muscles along the waist. You might start to feel that lift and connectivity, right? So I'm just going to breathe here, letting the arms be heavy and working through finding the sink in the low abdomen and then the natural lift at the base of the exhale. And at that point, you may get more length in the tailbone and sits bones. So just listening in to seeing where your connectivity is here. Take some nice deep breaths. Good. And then you're going to exhale, bring the palms together overhead. So now you've got midline, top to bottom. Okay. And now you're going to separate the knees. See if you can bring the soles of the feet together in midline, right off of the tailbone. Keep your knees floating upwards, so you have a narrow V. Not so much that your hip flexors get tight and engaged, but not also just falling into the joints here. Find that middle ground for you. And it might be hard. If it's hard, notice that it's hard. We're not going to be here for too long. But then flatten the hands out so that just you should rotate the pinky fingers out, but keep the thumb and first finger connected. And notice that little diamond shape you have there. Then bend the elbows. Bring the thumbs back behind you so the elbows are flat. And point the thumbs at the top of the head. And notice how you have a diamond at the top of the head, a diamond shape in the arms, a diamond shape between the top point of the ribs and the pelvis where the hips go out. So a diamond shape in between the legs and a diamond shape in between the arches of the feet. So there's these shapes that run through the body, and then fold the arms in and place that diamond over the belly button. Now I have a diamond shape in the middle of the diamond shape of the torso. So just visualizing midline and your geometry here does a lot to connect you to the symmetry in the body, which we have. But it's difficult to hold the hips level and the ribs level and the arms level, right? All through the shoulder girdle. And then we'll exhale, bring the arms down, and then fold the knees in and let them drop together to touch. Soften in the hip sockets. So we apply a little stress, hopefully not too much to the hips, and then we find some release. And then we're going to release even more. So take the towel roll out from underneath you, maybe a little bit more ceremoniously than I did. Make sure you have your 2 blocks at hand. And also, I jumped in to movement because I was so excited to get moving. A TheraBand. So I'm just going to reach mine here. The least amount of effort possible. So the TheraBand we're just going to put to the side for now, but we know where it is and have it accessible. So from here, with the knees together to touch, then we're just going to separate them out and draw the knees in. So really dealing with now the lower body being in kind of a mimicry of the torso's angles, right? The bottom part of that diamond shape in the torso, and feel that. And then we can lift the feet up, reach for the ankles or the outside of the feet, and just come into a little side to side rock. Happy baby pose. Now, if you're holding onto the ankles and you feel tension in the shoulders, acknowledge that. Soften the arms and hold at the base of the knees and rock side to side. See if that feels a lot better. If you want weightedness on the feet, which is what I miss when I hold the thighs, this is great for weightedness on the thighs and a little bit more stretch in the low back. But I want a weightedness in the feet. But if that stresses the arms out too much, you can use your TheraBand here. This is optional. Of course, you're going to get into it. So you're going to come out of the happy baby pose to get into it. If you want to try using it. Whoop, there we go. Center it, have it wide. That can be hard. Lots of TheraBands are sticky, right? And so getting them wide on the feet gets to be a little bit much. But you want to kind of have enough slack that the feet can open. And then maybe hold down by the knees so you can pull the knees into the chest still, but then you get a little tug, and then you can figure out how much tug down you want, or where you want to hold it from. So that's pretty good. That is a good mimicry of the tensile pattern that I get when I hold the outside edge of the toes here. So get a little softening. So today's class is really going to be focused around, I'm going to rock side to side here, a therapeutic approach to the low back and hips. We're going to talk about it for a little bit. Now that you've gotten some release there, come down and drop the knees together to touch and notice how it feels different. See if you can lengthen the low back and sacrum. It's not really tucking the tail in a big pull in, it's softening. And then take your hands down to your hips and try to level them out. And we're going to talk about the crown to tail connection in a little bit different way than we have in the past. So we're going to be mindful of it. Take your towel roll out to the side here so that it's perpendicular to the hips. Separate the knees finding them hip width distance apart, arms nice and long. And then I just want you to articulate your tailbone in preparation for a little miniature bridge. So tuck the tail and let it come to an arch. Arms are down by your side here, so it can support you. Bring the ankles underneath the knees. Really feel it lining up with the second and third toe joint, the center of the foot, and then heel lining up with the sits bones. Once you feel this is pretty natural, slow it down and just articulate up on an exhale. Floating the hips up, taking a moment to lengthen the neck and soften through the chest. And then set the hips down. As soon as you set the hips down, you kind of set your weight. So really be thinking about softening the ribs down to the ground. Go ahead and curl yourself up here. We're going to do that again. Anchor through the foot. Find the second and third toe joint as the midfoot anchor. And then lift your arch up from there. Feel a little lift in the back of the knees. Feel the inner thighs engage. So you feel engagement on the inside of the hip bones. Take an inhale and then exhale. Arms lengthen, press long into the floor as you articulate your tailbone off. Now, here you want to feel a nice long spine. Push through the feet like you're trying to pull your mat away from you. Let the tailbone lengthen. So don't tuck it. Think about softening at the top of the seat and lengthening through the outside of the legs. Then curl your head and chest up as you come up here, softening the ribs into the body. Interlace the hands at the back of the head. And then you're going to exhale. Bring one knee up to tabletop, but just soften it into the chest here and float the leg and try to find this place where your femur head lands right on top of the hip. You might need to wag your hip gently side to side to find that easy place, but you want to let the femur soften and let go. You want to try to drop the hip attachments. You've got the help of gravity here, right? Sinking that hip. It's getting a lot of release right now. I've probably dropped half an inch into my hip socket just by releasing muscle tension here. All the while, I'm really trying to think about this femur and rotate it in so that I feel the sits bone connected to the center of the back of the knee, connected to rotating the tibia and fibula, down there at the bottom, connected to the ankle, which is really connected to the second and third toe joint, which is why that distal edge, that outside edge, is going to be really important, that very end point, to know where you're landing, to follow that track from the second and third toe joint all the way through the center of the knee, which orients in the back as well, all the way down to the sits bone, right? So you bring your other leg up and soften. If this right leg or left leg, if you lifted that one first, if the first leg is getting tired, go ahead and put it on the floor. Actually, I would recommend that because it gives your body less to orient around. Now try to get this anchored, and you really have to anchor through both legs. So you go ahead and find the second and third toe joint anchor on the stable leg, the one that's down on the ground, dialing the knee in and dropping that hip down and in. And that becomes the stable base for your neutral pelvis. So like where that is, and then you work on orienting the opposite leg to it. Second and third toe joint, line the heel up with the back of the knee. Line the second and third toe joint up the center of the arch, the midfoot with the front of the knee. Then rotate your tibia and fibula, rotate the femur and the socket so that it's really landing parallel and dropping in. Then find a softness in the back of the knee in that alignment. And maybe wag your leg in and out. Find the place where it's not gripping and you can release that hip, that held tension. This may be very automatic for you in that you can feel the weight of the body releasing here, or there may be lots of holding
and a lot of tug of war. Like I feel much more tug of war on this side than I did on the other side, which got some good release, which is good because that's usually the side where I feel a lot of tension. So I'm getting some great release there, but this side is less able to now. So just work your way in here to the best of your ability. And then we're going to drop both legs. We're going to come off the hips. Notice how much lighter the legs feel after being elevated, how much lighter they feel when you are elevating them, and how much lighter they feel after they've been elevated. And just come into this gentle windshield wiper of the legs. You can take your feet wide to the edge of the mat. Remember this exercise, we're heavy on one side and heavy on the other. Now we're gonna switch. So drop the knees to one side, head goes to the other. So we're bringing out the spine, right? Like wringing a dish rag, bringing the two ends in opposite directions, opposing spirals. Feel where it meets in the middle, right? Feel where that rope, that thread that connects the upper and the lower body meet in the middle. So twist you one way and then the other way. So you can try to feel the whole kinetic chain, top to bottom. So the thing is, a lot of the felt tension we have lands in the hips. But much of the tension that is subconscious that we kind of can't feel as much because it's more central to the body is in the chest, the shoulders, and the head, right? So we always tend to think, oh, I have really tight hips. I've got to go down there and do something for them. Here's the reality is I've realized I started working with people with an occipital float, which is a very specific design pillow that releases the head and neck and puts it in suspension, but dynamically. So it can roll around 360 degrees in its placement, which is really, but also in a supported way, beneficial for those support muscles to get released. When you release the upper body at that very, very end point of the head, then you get, and then you hold it in that release, in that suspension, you get this release down through the whole system. And then you realize how much tension was held in the upper part of the body, which is more rigid because we chew, express, look, talk, and have our heart and all of the upper body posture stuff whenever we're using our arms is related to what we're doing with our shoulders, right? You get all of that to soften, and then the low body can self-adjust. A lot of tension lets go when the upper body is held in an easy place. So, ergo, we need to work through the hips, but much of the work we need to do in the hips is just allowing them to soften in alignment while we release in the upper body. So just think of that as an orientation. Be aware of the concert and conversation, concert of kinetic connections. That's an interesting phrase. And the conversation going on. That the head, its placement in the body is a mirror image of what's going on in the sacrum. They're directly related to each other and vice versa. So we can go either way, but this is one of the reasons why cranial sacral therapy can feel very subtle in the body, but may affect deep adjustments and transformations. That it's like chiropractic work, but your body self-adjusts if it's done well. And you're in a place to receive it. So that's where the woo comes in, right? You've got somebody really has a good sensitivity to those interconnections, is really educated on it. And then you have to be able to work with them within your body to have enough awareness and practice of release where you can soften into those places and let go when the channel is opened by the therapist. So more information than you wanted this morning, I'm sure. But that's where we do the crown to tail connection. And I think it's really helpful to talk through it. So you have some concept of why, and also can begin to investigate within yourself where, because the answer of where those tensions and releases are located is very personal. There's no one who can map that but you. So you can go into these practices, but really the thing that's transformative is your attention within them. It's how you move into these shapes and start to pay attention to the relationships. So as I was talking, I've moved the blocks underneath my knees to come into this release posture. And we're going to talk about a couple of things we've experienced so far. So experience this bilateral movement, which is same-sided, right? Where we're rocking side to side, we're letting one side be heavy and then the other, which is great for releasing the sides. I love it. I could probably do that for a long time. And then we experience the wringing out, the cross lateral, where the top and the bottom are moving in opposite directions. And then we experienced lying on our back and trying to find that midline and parallel alignment, becoming aware of the geometry that moves through the body, and really trying to find that midline point, really anchoring into that, trying to be heavy in the hips and the ribs and the shoulders so that they can kind of fall into place as we put them in there. And we experienced the legs unsupported as we lifted them up overhead, flat on the back. And then we experienced the legs supported, where we put something underneath the hips and we brought the legs into a neutral alignment. So we're building our awareness of that second and third toe joint of neutrality, of release. And then we're getting the limbs to a place where they weigh less by leverage, by that sort of angle we put ourselves on. So it's a very mechanical process and very sequential. It's designed to lead you into release. But throughout all of that, it requires your attention to it, your attention to really send the signals to try to communicate internally, all those radio stations that are along the way, which is your nervous system, all the way down, and to notice where some of the communication may be breaking down. That's a big part of the work, is to see if you can go in and rebuild those stations so that they can receive the information all the way down through the system, right? There's a lot going on in there, top to bottom. So it takes a lot of patience. And one of the things that helps us develop patience and build our skills around attention is the breath. It's a very helpful tool in that way. And now we're resting in a place where I've used these blocks underneath the knees to bring myself into supported rest, supported release, right? This is a released position for the hips. And we're going to kind of work through this release a little more intentionally. So we're going to go back to that memory physically of that release point when we had bilateral, same-sided movement. We would drop the weight into that side, softening over and melting in, okay? And I'll leave the left leg alone, and we're just going to roll the sole of the right foot up and take it off the block. But kind of with the right hand, just help the block stay ready to receive the leg. And then you're going to inhale with the right knee up to the ceiling, with the left leg be heavy, and then exhale so you can just melt that leg open. Try to soften the outside of the hip. Catch the leg at the point before it grabs to try to support itself, and let it get even heavier into the block. We'll do that 2 more times. Inhale, come up. This is a great thing to do in a one-on-one session live, where the instructor holds your leg and just lets you be weighted into the leg. That's a different release, but you have to kind of imagine that here. Somebody holding your leg and just kind of guiding it down, and your leg getting heavy and dropping into it. One more time. So this is sort of the self-therapeutic version. It's a little harder to feel without the tactile support, but we try to release into it. And then feel up above the things that may be trying to grab and support that leg. Drop the weight of the leg in, and we'll try the other side. Roll the sole of the left foot onto the floor. Try to let the right leg be totally weighted now. Heavy, heavy, heavy. Thinking of sinking the back of the hip into the ground underneath you like sand. Sinking down, right? Releasing, like you were releasing your weight into sand. Warm sand. And then Slowly on an exhale, soften the left leg down and in, let it release. See if you can release the weight of your shoulder, let go of holding onto the block in between, right? And you can let your head fall to the side as well. So it's a real softening over to that side, letting it drop. Good. 2 more times. Inhale, rock onto the right, onto the left foot, knee up to the ceiling. Exhale, soften over, whole-sidedness. Once the block is propped underneath the leg, you can keep going and let the release through the torso and the head and shoulders translate to a little bit more release in that hip. One more time. Inhale up. And exhale, soften, open. And melt. Good. Inhale, just bring your head back to center. Exhale. Now just turn the head and the chest and the shoulders and soften over to the right. Notice if that's harder or easier. Really soften the channel all the way down through the ribs and the back of the hips. And then try to keep that side soft. Soften over just a little bit to the left, just to get a little weightedness, but not too heavy. And then now we're going to land center and try to be heavy equally through both sides. Really released. See if you can kind of feel where things are bound in the back of the ribs. This might be a great place since we're laying flat on the back. If you don't already have it, you may have decided you wanted it already yourself. But if you haven't, because we've been working through a bunch of stuff, you may have forgotten, I did temporarily, that you can put the towel roll at the back of your head and get your ribs to soften a little bit more. Maybe. And that is really about fine tuning where that towel roll lands at the base of the head and how high it is. Just about perfect. One more notch. There we go. Yes. And then find your happy place here. We're going to take the arms out wide to the side, and then you're just going to exhale. Bring the palms together so that your elbows make a little diamond shape. The shoulders can still cascade down into the floor, but you feel a little pressure of the arms into the sockets. And take 2 nice deep breaths here as you press the palms together. And then inhale, open the arms out to the side and release them down to about 45 degrees. And notice how that softens the shoulders when the arms are below the heart, and how it softens the chest. Because the heart actually has to work exponentially harder every degree that your arms get above heart height. So as soon as they go below heart height, but are still nice and long and released into the floor, then the chest actually relaxes, which softens the whole tissue. The whole system gets a little less activated when the arms are lower, because the heart doesn't have to work as much, right? Which is a layer of effort in the body. It's a significant one, I might add, as is breathing. So from here, now we're going to inhale and exhale. Gently bring your right leg up. Try to do it softly without tightening. If you notice a lot of tightening, a lot of efforting through the hips, let's try again. So this is where the awareness comes in, right? Inhale and exhale. Stay really heavy in the hips. Find a little scoop and support from the abdomen. Lengthen through the tail rather than tucking. And try to use contraction in the abs less than the hips to pull the leg upright. If you haven't found that yet, that's okay, but know that that's a transition you're going to want to make in order to get out of efforting everything from the outside edge of the leg and bring it into center, right? Same with the left leg. Now, exhale. You can put your hands on your hips if that helps. Soften, connect into the abs, lengthen the tailbone, and see if you can float the left leg up without a lot of grabbing in the top of the hips. So we're going to lengthen the left leg out now and flex the foot. Take a moment here, and I just want to see if you can turn your head towards me, and hopefully the screen is big enough that you can see what I'm talking about. I'm going to take my hand into a C shape. You can do this with me if you want, and frame the hip connection. So I really can locate it for myself. From the bottom of where I can feel the bony protrusion of the hip is where I set my thumb. And then the top curve of the C, my fingertips go on the top of the thigh. And in between that is the hip connection. You should take a moment and start to draw and you're not gonna go very far, just draw your left heel in like you're gonna pull the leg in and feel the contraction that happens in the front of the hip. That's a fairly natural contraction here. With the knee bent, but the leg fairly extended, and you can put the foot on the floor if you want, so you're in a comfortable place. See if you can now uncontract. So stabilize the leg and get longer in the front of the hip. So your fingers and thumbs are moving away from each other. And you're going to have to make sure that you're orienting between that second and third toe joint. Center of the knee, ankle, and inside of the hip. Now, lengthen out from those hip flexors and get longer with the bone in the socket. And if you get down there and you can adjust the leg in more to its natural rotation, you may find some tensioning at the top of the hip releases, because much of our imbalance goes into rotation in the legs, and those attachments at the hips get really bound up because that's a nexus point for how our systems rotate. So hopefully I just had a really phenomenal adjustment. The front of my hip feels really open. This is the learning that I had in ballet class when I was with my teacher, that I felt in that class how shortened I was in the front of the hip and how that carried my back into an arch. Whereas if I can lengthen in the front of the hip, that actually allows my sits bones and tailbone to sink. So maybe send your awareness to the back of the spine and see if you can feel a little release in the back of the hips, still holding that leg in its second to third toe joint orientation, right? Feel that midline of the leg. So the midline in the center of the body, and then we have the midline in the joint structures. And that's what really helps. So now we're gonna soften the knee back up or pull the knee. We try to be as soft as possible so you don't create more rigidity there. It's gonna have to contract a little bit, but try to keep some of that beautiful length. And then when you place the foot back on the floor, see if you can kind of sink back into that alignment and length. We're gonna try the other side. Hopefully you're finding things here. Hopefully this isn't in the realm of, whoa, this is way too abstract. Hopefully we're still working in a really concrete way where you can find these alignment points. Second and third toe joint. We're looking at the right leg now. Find that ankle, center of the ankle, center of the knee, center of the hip. And then you're just gonna make the C shape and frame the hip socket. So you have the thumb over the hip bone and the fingertips on the top of the thigh, and then trying to keep your second and third toe joint orientation, lengthen that leg out. The first job is just get the leg lengthened out and see where you land here. Probably you're gonna go into your pattern of leg extension on your way out. And so you'll learn a little bit of something about where your rotation is, and then see if you can make a little adjustment. It will be helped by drawing the heel back slightly, not too far, an inch or two maybe, to where you can put the foot down, and then reorienting the leg. Keep moving the towel around to support your head where you want it. You're having lots of micro adjustments in the spine, hopefully. Shifting the ribs on top of the hips a little bit as you find these places of release down below. Now the upper body, which we worked on before, will be able to soften a little bit more. Good. So we're dropping the weight of that right hip down. You're finding the second and third toe joint alignment all the way up into the hip. And once it's softened there, you can take it out. And hopefully the legs landed in a little different spot and you can release a little bit more, right? Through the front of the thigh. We'll just stay here long enough for that length, the weight of the leg to drop into that length, which can be very therapeutic when you have one side that's kind of neutralized, then the leg can find its natural balance point. And hopefully the release of the tightness allows them to come into more equality together, right? One more nice deep breath here. So we need to address each system. Each leg is its own balance and counterbalance system, all the way down into how we land into the foot, up into the hip socket, right? So we have to each equalize them separately because they have separate things going on. And then hopefully we've brought them into better balance individually. Then we can bring the duet into play and try to get the two of them talking together. Never thought about your hips as a duet before, did you? Try to stay soft as you draw that heel back, soft and long. It's going to contract a little bit, but our goal is to figure out how to use minimum effort, right? Okay, to get there. Now, soften the hips down in center and go ahead and draw your right knee into your chest. Interlace the hands, soften the shoulders down, soften the chest. You're heavy here. If this towel roll now feels like it's in the way because we've come back into a mini inversion here, the tailbone goes a little high, so the hips are a little lifted, which is good. And then you can take the towel out from underneath the head, stretch your left leg down and try to mimic that release of the hips you just had. And try to feel a release in the front of the thigh also, right? If you feel pinching, move away, try to lengthen the front of the leg and maybe press into the front of the thigh as you drop the leg in to try to keep that release. And then just slowly move the hand out of the way as you drop the knee in. Maybe that will help. Maybe not, depends on complex of things you have going on. Left hand on the knee, right hand out to the side, off the shoulder, and then you're going to exhale, come across the body. And then find the block underneath your calf and soften your weight into it. See if you can melt into this shape here and feel release through the back of the hips and the top of the hip. This block is on its medium setting. Just realizing it went way back in the corner there. Come out a little bit here. It's because of where the props and things are set. Be able to see better. You can keep doing your business. So really thinking about releasing through the back of the hips, releasing the top leg onto the block here. Now we're going to bring in the rotation of the upper body. Bring your right hand up overhead. And just feel this stretch open along the side. Your head can face the side, so can we turn over to the left? Or you can have your head facing up to the ceiling. And exhale, rotate open through the shoulders, the head, the chest, the neck. Nice full deep breaths here. Good. Inhale, come in. We're going to switch sides. Exhale, draw your left knee into your chest and stretch the right leg out long. Try to remember back to that sense of length and release and the alignment points along the leg. And I think all the way back to earlier in the class for midline. Right hand on the knee, left hand out to the side. Take an inhale. And exhale, bring leg across the body. Place the block underneath your knee. I have mine on my medium setting. You might find you want it higher. Higher will make the leg not in line with the hip, so it's ideal if you could be at that mid height. Ooh, just got a nice adjustment in my hips, and then up in my elbow. Back of the hip, and then my elbow here. Love it. Okay, and then we're gonna come to laying all the way on our sides. And inhale that left arm up, and then reach it long overhead towards the wall on top of you, or up above, right? Not just up to the ceiling, but up to the wall. And then as you're ready here, roll the chest open and try to soften in this position. Really seeing where you can find some more release in the hips. And we're gonna kind of keep some thematic things going on here in the last few minutes of class to keep us moving along these lines of release. It's rhythmic, it's like the breath, these waves through the body. Inhale, in through the nose, and out through the nose. Trying to soften on the exhale. And release. Good. And then you come back into center, draw the knees into the chest, and rock a little side to side. Soften the feet down, let the knees fall into midline. Take a moment, since we just twisted side to side, to reset where your midline is. Toe heel your feet in. Arms out wide to the side, just to sort of hang off the shoulders here. Thinking about the tailbone being heavy and long, and then you can put a towel roll underneath the head. Anytime you're flat on your back like this, you can. You're going to keep the left knee to the ceiling and lengthen the right leg out, flexing through the foot, reaching the heel long, and then you're going to bend the right knee in, land that foot, anchoring through the second and third toe joint underneath the knee, and then you're going to stretch out through the left leg. Try to find those anchor points. Try to release the front of the leg, just like we did. This is the training was about. We went low and slow to start, and then come back. Try to draw that heel back without a lot of contraction. One more time each side, keeping the ribs soft. Towel under the head if that helps. Soften through the center of the body out and in, left, out, and in. Perfect. Good. Landing here, lower your arms down along the sides. And then you're going to roll through your foot. Soften the ribs as you start to transfer your weight. Pause while your toes are still on the floor on the right side. And then float that left knee into its best alignment and anchor it there. And have that anchoring really land in neutral hips here before you transfer the weight out of the foot. And then on an exhale, feel the abdominals contract and the leg float up rather than the front of the leg tighten. Trying to stay nice and soft. Place the right foot down. Anchor down through the second and third toe joint. Feel the supporting knee. Feel the hips soften. Exhale, release. Soften through the ribs. And then press the hands in just a little bit to float that leg up without using a lot of effort. And come down one more time each side. Last one. Good. And then from here, go ahead and find your towel roll. It's way back here. Ooh, almost. There we go. And bring it alongside your hips. You're gonna place it underneath your hips. My towel is a little bunchy. There we go. Right at the base of the sacrum, and then find your TheraBand. I did do a little 180 there overhead to see where it landed, and lift your right foot in, and then lift your left foot in. Drive the TheraBand nice and wide. Find that neutral point with the legs where you can just hang them. Maybe drop the knees into the chest a little bit. Find that place where your knees, second and third toe joint, and hips can be nice and lined up. Have a soft bend in your knees. You're gonna drop one foot down to the ground. Stay long and released in that hip, and then bring your other foot up overhead. Stay soft in the knees, balance the elbows on the floor, and just drop the femur head down into the socket. Let your tailbone and other hip adjust so you don't have too much pressure on the hips and ligaments that attach them. So you should be able to have a nice amount of play here in finding your alignment. And then we'll switch sides. Left foot comes in, right foot comes down. Second and third toe joint alignment. I'm getting huge adjustments in my sits bones and sacrum and really finding a loose neutral point. Hopefully you can too, the sort of feedback loop and all the release work we've been doing to this point. Keep softening through the ribs because that's going to allow for ease of movement above the hips, while the leg support allows for ease of movement below. So really found a way into the middle of the body here. This work is what we need to do to have access to our abdominals, because if we're all twisted and bound up, then that tightness keeps us from even coming in, right? And that tightness can happen above and below center, usually does, and it's usually based around some rotations. And those rotations go through the whole body, which is why we have to work really sequentially to find our way through to this neutral parallel position. And then we can begin to do dynamic movement from it and make choices about how we engage into that, right? And it is 11:30 perfectly. I can't believe it. Susan will be laughing because I completely lost track of class on Tuesday, our flow class. I was in the flow. Take your weight off the towel roll. And it was odd because usually I have this very strong internal clock, and the light has gone off at the perfect time today. Love it. Let's gently roll over to one side here. Come on up. Did I? I taught a half hour over, didn't I? Oh my God, you guys are brilliant. Okay, well, hopefully you enjoyed it. I thought it was exactly on time because it was 9:30 to 11 would be, I gave you a 2-hour fall workshop today. On hips. Hopefully your hips feel amazing. My hips feel amazing. You're all still here, so you didn't die on the vine, which is amazing. On one hand, it's very generous. Like, yes, you got extra half hour of class.
No.
And on the other hand, wow. So I'm gonna get on my clock. Somehow this time change obviously has scrambled my internal clock. I really have taught so many years where I'm on the hour that I have this like little internal timer. It's like a turkey that it just pops up when it's cooked. Right? I think somebody took my timer out. It's not working. But guys, that was an amazing class, you guys. For me, I felt such a shift. I don't know if that happened for you or not. I hope it did. And I hope you can carry on into your weekend with a little bit more ease, and hopefully will trust me to get on my clock. Thank you all for being here for 2 hours. Clearly, I have no problem doing movement forever. I do it my entire life. So thank you for your patience. I'm saying that a lot these days. I appreciate you guys. All right. So we had come to a pause point here, and then we're going to carry on now that I figured out what time it really is. Just coming back onto our back and coming into this little side to side rock to check in where we may have transferred from, right? We want to notice transitions that happen for us. And we're going to kind of come up onto the hips and into movement. One of the things I've noticed with the clients I work with, we do all this amazing work, restructuring, reorienting on our backs. And we spend, an hour doing it. when I'm working with people in person, I can really see a lot of what's going on with them. And I can see those changes happen. Roll to one side and come up, and then come onto all fours. And then we'll go from our backs to them being done with their session into a walkout. And they walk out exactly the same way they came in. Because we hadn't repatterned standing movement or walking. And so that's something that therapeutically, if you're really trying to help somebody transition their movement patterns and not just work them out, you need to also incorporate how we get on the legs. So from this all fours, there's this beautiful stretchy thing that we can do with our leg, where you can reach through one heel, lift your knee off, and stretch long, and then you can round through the spine like you're coming into cat, curling the chin in and tucking the tail. Feel how that pulls the whole back structure of the body nice and long. But you're weight bearing now. Oh my goodness. So now we're gonna do the other side. So our joints are meant to be weight bearing, but they can't do it really efficiently if they're not in alignment. So all that work that we did on the floor is super important to being in alignment. And then we can begin to experiment with how we weight bear efficiently, which is coming to sitting, standing, kneeling postures, right? The doing things postures. One more time each side. Finishing up here. And then we take that into weight shifts. So weight bearing, weight shifts, so that we can figure things out. Landing on all fours, thinking about where your midline is in this position, which is different orientation than it is on the floor. Thinking about that second and third toe joint, where you might be lacking some communication in the ankles. See if you can lengthen them out and get some contact into the floor. Finding that second and third toe joint orientation all the way from the center of the foot into the knee. And it should have contact along that whole line, which is probably kind of awkward to feel into. And then we're going to inhale to arch, keep equal weight on both sides, and exhale to curl under. Go slow and make it small here. Slow and small for the first two. Half or less of your usual range of motion in this. Think about how you're pulling forward and notice if you're leading with one shoulder or the other. If one is more tense than the other side is. Same with the neck. Just shake the head a little bit. And then same with the hips. Are they tracking along midline? Make sure you're tracking together with the tail and the nose. So crown of the head. Notice where tension is here. One more. Inhale to arch. Maybe going bigger, biggest. And exhale to curl under. Good. And then we're going to come back to child's pose. This one is always really telling. If we don't have enough magnesium, potassium, or water, we often will get cramps in the ankle or the arches of the foot, or if there's tightness in the hips and low back. This may bring some cramping in. You may want to be elevated if you feel that a lot. Lengthen the arms forward and release the crown of the head down, softening the chest, melting the shoulders. Full deep breaths here into the back of the ribs and the hips. Good. And then to make sure that we're opening the upper body, which tends to be rounded forward, we need some spinal extension. We need to do it from a supported place. So we'll come into our Pilates work here. So I want to do this transition super specifically because this is a nice way to feel this. From child's pose, come up onto your forearms and kind of lengthen the elbows in front of you so they're in front of the shoulders, but make the number 11 here with your arms. You know, we do second and third toe joint, do second and third toe finger, second and third finger joint through the center of the wrist.
elbow and shoulders. Lift up here. And now lengthen, pull the knees in and lengthen through the tops of the feet, second and third toe joint, down to the floor. And orient yourself to midline here in this very specific way. Don't put your pubic bone down. Don't anchor your hip bones until you feel things leveling out. Find that midline point, equal weight in the right hip bone and the left hip bone. Find the center of the knee, right underneath the center of the hip. All those landmarks that we've been finding, right? But from this orientation. And then lengthen the elbows forward even more and take them out to the side. So you can stack the hands so they land right under the forehead. And that's the bottom half of that diamond from the shoulders to the fingertips that we're in. And now feel that geometry, the diamond shape in the torso. And then kind of the diamond shape of the legs. It's a long diamond. You could even think of it as a triangle, right? If your feet are wide, and then the nexus of the legs, the pubic bone and tailbone is narrow, then there's an equal length of diamond back behind you like a tail, pulling you along. And that's where you orient your tailbone towards, which will help you find a little lift in the pubic bone. That might be way abstract for you, but maybe you can visualize it. Geometric person, right? Try to press through the tops of the legs equally. Bring your arms down so that your fingertips orient underneath the shoulders. And that should help you draw the shoulder blades down the back by bringing the elbows to squeeze in along your sides and point down to the floor and press them down. And bring your fingers a little forward if you feel like there's more movement, but you're restricted by the hand placement. Trying to bring the elbows as close to the floor as they can come and maintain the arms in along the sides. Keep that long lift through the pubic bone, equal anchor through the right and left sits bones. Inhale here, and then exhale, roll an imaginary ball forward with your nose. Lifting up. Finding a nice arc here. Now, I don't want you to go into the low back at all. So what I really want you to do is feel where the head and chest articulation is. Don't go into hyperflexion with the neck either. Keep the chin knotted so it roughly points forward, right? You can even keep it knotted down. And then we're going to release the forehead back down. And that should help eliminate some tightness in the back. To feel how you're moving here top to bottom without a lot of strain. So that's why we're going to move on the exhale. Inhale here. Exhale. Roll the ball forward. Feel a little lift underneath the pubic bone. Lengthen the tail. Pelvic floor lifts up and in. Find your Pilates scoop. It's upside down, so it feels weirder to try to do, but you still have access to it. To slowly draw a line up the wall with the nose. One more time here. And exhale, soften down. And take an inhale at the base. Reset the shoulders on the back, squeezing the elbows in along the sides, bounce the hips. Exhale. Go slow so you can really ride the midline like one of those gondolas going up a mountain on a single cable. Straight through the middle. Big arc. Keep pushing a little through the hands and down through the elbows and hips to anchor. And you should be able to just change the leverage of the body so that the upper body floats up, and it'll be a natural stopping point. And then go ahead and release the forehead down onto the hands and soften the hips. Maybe rocking a little side to side. So we still want a feeling of softness in the low back and a feeling of softness in the front of the hips. Hopefully, if you're not quite there, you can return to it. We're going to come back to folded leaf on our way up to standing. So we're going to tuck the toes. You can even do a little heel rock here. That can sometimes loosen up the, or a toe rock maybe, the front of the thighs.
Curl the chin in, squeeze the elbows in along the side, lift the hips, knees together, press back. First, you do this exalted bow here with the arms forward, and that's like the opposite stretch that cats and dogs do, right? In the morning, we go out nice and long, and then folded leaf is bringing the arms back along the sides and curling the chin into the chest. So you're really rounding more towards the back of the crown of the head. You're so curled under here, and then you're trying to soften the shoulders. If this feels like way too much, put a block underneath the head and maybe a rolled up towel on the back of the knees. Or maybe even sit up on a block and do this, right? Then you're going to take your hands under the shoulders and gently round yourself up. And hopefully you're okay sitting here on your knees to sit back on the heels. So this will not be a comfortable pose. I would say from my teaching experience, for anybody who is over 35, we start to get into probably 70% of people over 35 can have trouble doing this. And then when you get into the 50s and 60s range of your life, kind of like from 45 on, the hip and knee relationship changes just from use. And this feels less and less reasonable unless you're constantly conditioning these and you don't have injuries or any joint inflammation that or tissue inflammation that makes this position uncomfortable. So you will have to modify. The best modification here for a seat is to come into easy seat. You can start with 2 blocks. You can also put the towel roll on this. And the towel roll is a modification that's not necessarily based on your bendability. So if you can bend here and sit here comfortably, that doesn't mean the towel roll isn't going to be a beneficial modification. So this is really individual preference and what supports your body in the most beneficial way, and only you can know. And this is true of much of our practice here. So if you want to try this potential modification, how does it feel? What you're asking your body is, how does it feel to be a little higher? How does that feel in the hips? This was amazing. This is, to me, a more neutralizing posture. Some days it feels better to sit lower, and this upper position either feels more precarious or it feels like more strain, or just like it's nicer to be lower. So I change in terms of my preference. I always like to check because I don't want to assume that my preference is one if I haven't tried the other, because they're different. Today, this is really increasing that drop and release that I've been feeling all week in my own classes that I'm taking and that I've been seeing happen in other people that I get really excited about. So I'm hoping that some of this is translating to you as well, even though I'm not giving you physical adjustments in person, that you're able to visualize what we're doing enough to kind of find it. Hands on the thighs. Soften the ribs. Bring the shoulders right over the hips. And then see if you can neutralize the neck here with just a little gentle side to side sway of the head. Kind of like you're gently saying, no, thank you. It's not my preference. But it doesn't have to be a no. It can just be a soft swing too. Feel that pendulum-like motion. Right? Just stay in the lower range, not the farthest swinging of the pendulum. And then pause in the middle and gently go up and down. I like to close my eyes doing this. For some of us, our internal proprioception is scrambled enough with the inner ear or other things going on in the head that vertigo is an issue. Or you could have like low-grade migraine, or you're prone to them. Movements of the head can be disoriented in that situation. If you have any nausea things going on, not to suggest that you should, I almost hate talking about it, but those are situations in which you want to modify these head movements, or maybe keep the eyes open or keep them super small. You can even do side to side head movement with just the eyes. And it moves the small muscles at the top of the head, but feels much more manageable. So just notice how your body is receiving this direction, right? Nodding the head up and down very slowly. And also for me, like I can narrate my experience here, I'm softening in the chest and I'm working to really bring the ribs and chest and shoulders on top of the hips and soften these rotations that happen up here, right? And we feel into the rotation, but then we also want to come center. So take your hands and make this C again, and this time the C shape's going to come in between the hip and the rib cage. And now I want you to rotate side to side. Feel the weight shift from one hip to the other in this seated position, just rotating a little side to side. Feel how that shifts in the hips. If you can't feel it, ask yourself where the connection is going, or maybe where you're holding, so you're maybe not shifting your weight equally side to side. It should be kind of a swinging motion, and it's actually kind of a rolling swing. So if I were to mimic it outside, right, it's a sort of figure eight, that infinity symbol, right? So from here, it's very small, it's kind of subtle, with the hips do this little rocking motion as we walk, okay? And so now, make it smaller and smaller and smaller, and begin to feel midline. We spent a lot of time finding midline on the floor, so hopefully you can find it here. And we'll inhale the arms out to the side, try to soften the shoulders down the back, just like you did when we were on our backs. And then exhale, bring the palms together in the center. Land the shoulders right on top of the ribs. You can really feel it here. Gentle pressure through the palms. Keep it light. Connect through your ribs now and find that Pilates scoop. So that resting engagement is what we call it. And make sure the Pilates scoop isn't creating tug and pull in the hips, that you're nice and long through the front. Find that. And then from there, inhale, reach the arms up. Lengthen the shoulders down the back. Woo, tight. What we didn't do was arching through the upper spine, but I really wanted to focus on length, and that arching can sometimes bring tightness into the back. Exhale, calm down through the hands. We did a little bit on our spinal extension, right, in our front facing. We're inhale, sweep up. We're going to come back to that spinal extension here in our awareness. Exhale. Bring the hands down to the heart. Reset your shoulders and ribs. Find midline. You move around a lot more than you realize. I certainly do. And then inhale, open the arms out to the side and fold the fingertips up. Fingers facing the ceiling. Exhale. Bring the elbows together and palms together. And inhale, open. One more time here. Exhale. Try to soften the chest and lift the collarbone. Hard to do in that contraction. Inhale, open. And then exhale, soften the chest, lift the collarbone as you draw the elbows down along the sides. Feel your collarbone working equally, widening equally. Feel your ribs knitting together and lengthen the arms. And that mimics that cobra. So we'll do that one more time. Come up to cactus, arms. Your saguaro cactus here. Level off the hips, be heavy on both sides. And then exhale, float the elbows in. This is just like pressing the elbows in along the sides when we're in that cobra position. And then lengthen the arms down. Feel that palm rotate at the bottom and spin the arm open and let it spin open through the shoulders, right? And then we're going to lead back with the thumbs. Inhale. Arms come back, try to keep them even. Exhale, up and overhead. Hands come down to the heart. Perfect timing here, guys. We're going to work our way up to standing. Plant your hands on the floor. Glide forward. Land the hands underneath the shoulders. You can move the blocks
splash towel out from underneath you. Tuck the toes, lift the knees, and press back to downward facing dog. Woo-hoo-hoo. Big stretch here. Feel your shoulders lengthen down the back, feel your neck lengthen away. And then from here, you're gonna lift the heels, bend the knees, look up to the top of the mat, and step your feet to your hands. Feet come right underneath the hips. Orient to the second and third toe joint. Bend your knees right over them. Track. Hang the arms. Lift up from the center of the foot. Don't rock to the outside or the inside. Keep the leg relaxed in the center of the hip socket. We did so much work down the ground to find it. Come up slowly. And then we're going to bend and come straight back down. Right, hang forward. Really try to find the place where your knees are tracking over the second and third toe joint. And then exhale, soften the hips. Weights in the center of the foot. Knees tracking second and third toe joint. Feel it connecting into the femur, straighten the leg at the same time. Keep lengthening the tailbone down underneath you. Lift both hip bones up equally. Stand long. Remember that C shape. You can make the C shape with both hands on each side between the bottom of the hip bone and the top of the thigh. And then take your C shape from the top of the hip to the bottom of the ribs. And then hang your arms long like you had them when you were laying on the floor. And then also when you were sitting on the blocks, lengthening them down here. Feel that length and openness in the collarbone. Land the head right on top of the shoulders. Bend the knees a little bit. Soften through the hips. Try to settle them. So you just are dropping into that knee bend like half an inch at most. And then slowly straighten the legs. Try to stay relaxed in the front of the hips. Trying to anchor the tailbone and sits bones straight down underneath you. And notice where you land here. Try to stand equally on both legs. Good. Ta-da! You did it. So from here, now we're going to do a little bit of weight transfer, right? So just go, take your feet wide. I'm turning to face the mat here. Hold your hips and weight bear a little side to side. This should be pretty soft. So we want is to continue that sense of softening into the hip as we kind of rock to one side and rock to the other side. Remember that bilateral movement exercise we did at the beginning and how you stayed soft in the shoulders and ribs as you transferred the weight from hip to hip. Try to stay soft in the shoulders and ribs as you transfer the weight from hip to hip here. Good. Now we're going to slow it down and keep the feet connected to the ground. And we're going to kind of carry a tray or watermelon, so some imaginary weight. To one side, sink into the hip. And to the other side, sink into the hip. And sink. So inhale through center, exhale. Keep this in a range where there's not a lot of pressure on the knee as you go side to side. Heavy. So this is getting a little grounded into that hip socket and trying to release attachments that might be kind of grippy. And then bring your weight into center here. And we're just going to mimic walking. We're actually lifting the foot off the floor. We're just rolling through the foot. But take the opposite hand forward, same hand back. So this is this cross lateral. And turn the head a little bit. Just try to make it even though, and don't notice what's happening with the shoulders. Right? Try to keep them moving evenly. Side to side. Inhale, center, exhale, side. Actually,
what's ending up happening is, if I'm moving in a really smooth way, I'm inhaling to one side, exhaling to the other side. Right, so try that breath cycle, and then we'll just have to switch it so we can get. So you're inhaling to the opposite side and exhaling to the opposite side. Good. And soften and just relax. Feet together, just gonna do a nice easy stretch here, but keep a little softness in the knees to start. Inhale, take your arms up overhead. Grab hold of one wrist and exhale, bow over to the side. Gently curve forward. Just have this be a nice easy stretch where you feel grounded in the feet. And then over to the other side. And then up. Switch to the hold in the wrist. And you're going to bend over to that side. Round forward. And open to the other side. And up. And then we're just going to soften. So you let go of the wrists. Head cascades down right through the midline of the body. You dangle the arms and bow forward. Weight into the hands. Work the legs towards straight. Just to a point where it feels good to stretch and release the head and neck and shoulders. And then bend the knees. And slowly roll up through the spine and come to standing. And then separate your feet. You guys, we did it. This time for real. It's actually 11 o'clock. I'm going to change my clock right. Very first thing when we get done. Great spending time with you this morning. I think this is my favorite class I've ever taught. So thank you for requesting hips today. It was perfectly timed with the learning I've been doing with my clients and myself in the last week. Very exciting. Glad we could do that together. We developed new material.
Anastasia, that's great.
What was that?
I said, thanks, Anastasia. That was